often there's a profound validation at the beginning of the journey. I was on a call with somebody 2 days ago where I was running them through the framework, and there were tears because they could sense a version of themselves that they really liked, but getting permission to really say, you know what, this is me, this is who I'm going to be. And this really is my zone of genius, and I can forget about all that other stuff I don't like anyway. It's really liberating. There's another thing that goes along with this, which is fear. That in order to say yes to one thing, you have to say no to others. And a lot of people, when they understand the theory of, okay, I'm going to lean into my zone of genius and I'm going to be for one person in particular. Well, hold on a minute, I'm doing all this other stuff, and that's what pays all the bills. So I can't just stop doing that like some kind of hippie going off to live in a commune because my kids need shoes. So the way I describe this is it's a little bit like an oil tanker, that when you pick a new zone of genius or you decide, okay, I'm going to stand for this and I'm going to be for this person, all you're doing is setting a new course. It's a new heading for the ship. Whereas previously it was just sailing around the sea willy-nilly. We have a direction now.
Namaste, beautiful souls. I'm Shilpa, and you're tuned into the Omni Mindfulness Podcast, a sanctuary for spiritual entrepreneurs. As a holistic mindfulness coach and social marketing strategist, I'm here to guide you on a transformative journey. On this show, we explore captivating stories and provide practical tools that deepen your connection with your authentic self. Through the personal and professional narratives of remarkable individuals, we expand our consciousness and ignite the spark of possibility. Each season, I curate content that empowers you to create a holistic lifestyle encompassing spirituality, mindfulness, energy awareness, and mindset. Join me as we engage in conversations with experts in their respective fields and share solo casts from yours truly, all aimed at supporting you and relaxing, revitalizing, resetting your body, mind, and spirit. I'm your host and the visionary behind Omni Mindfulness. So what if just one story had the power to shift the trajectory of your life? What if you could become an instrument in helping others realize their true selves? And what if your soul's higher purpose lies in experiencing the joy of Omni Mindfulness? Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your story. Up next is Bob Gentle, the podcast host of the Personal Brand Entrepreneur Show. While his podcast scratches the curiosity itch for Bob, it also fuels and shapes his client work, keeping him very current and connected to what is going on right now. Bob is a digital marketing and monetization consultant who has worked in the field of digital marketing for over 20 years, for most of that time running his own agency, Amplify Me. He now works with a handful of corporate clients, but focuses on helping personal brand entrepreneurs fine-tune their product or business model. He does this through niche personal brand agency services, speaking, consulting, and workshops, as well as group-based or one-on-one programs of hybrid coaching, consulting, and training. I could not think of a more mindful coach in this space than Bob. And now, without further ado, here is Bob. Welcome, Bob. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It is an absolute pleasure.
I'm so honored, and I genuinely love your content. And just before I hit record, we had a conversation about Amplify. Now, before I go there, though, one of the topics that's like the overarching topic I'm hoping that we can touch upon is the art of storytelling for solopreneurs or entrepreneurs. And perhaps maybe we can tie that with your brand name, Amplify, correct?
So the brand is Amplify Me. which is, I guess, a slightly distinct from the slightly more generic Amplify. And the reason I picked the name was I'd been in traditional marketing for a long time, and I never really enjoyed it because I would be hired to come and wave a magic wand and make a company perform better. When I knew that most businesses, when they're successful, they're built by a charismatic business leader who loves what he does, and people generally like that person. And I knew that if I wanted that business to be more successful, we needed to take whatever that leader had and distill it, share it around the other people, and help them with a little bit of leadership become a little bit more confident and competent in their self leadership. What was he doing or she doing? And let everybody do that. It never really worked. So, what I decided was the thing that I liked the most was connecting people who had something really valuable with the people in the world who needed that the most. And the only way I could really do that was helping people A, understand what it was that made them special, B, who was the person they really wanted to serve, and then help them find the tools and the techniques and the technologies to connect. Because everything in business is about connection. And there's an awful lot that we could go into there. But that's essentially my business now, is helping people build, market, and monetize their expertise through the power of a strong personal brand. And that doesn't have to be raw alpha male out there. Look at me. Everybody's unique and everybody has a personal brand that they can be intentional about. So that's where the name Amplify Me came from.
And that's truly resonates with my philosophy around why I even transitioned or pivoted into what I do now. And maybe you could step me through someone who is going to come to you as maybe even like a female solopreneur, potential one, and your how you walk them through the process.
So I have a framework, like any good business owner. I have a process. I'm process led. And one of the nice things about being very visible and having a bit of an audience is it gives you permission to specialize. Anybody who's accustomed to doing business in a local business community will recognize that it's very hard to specialize because there isn't enough demand to sustain your specialism. But once you go online, that becomes much easier. So I made a commitment to myself. I was going to step outside my comfort zone because I'm a naturally very self-conscious, shy person. It took me a lot to go online and do this kind of thing, but it became normal over time. And the framework that I developed was to facilitate that process with other people. So I have 5 stages: understanding your personal brand foundations, then building authority, then building your discoverability, then productization, and then scaling. And where that begins for everybody is, what is your zone of genius? Absolute step one. And the truth is, a lot of people don't know because they haven't had the opportunity to consider that they could specialize, that they could really niche. So oftentimes it's asking questions like, what lights you up? What is it that people reflect back to you that they value from you over and above everything? And people have never thought that those were the things that they could really lean in on. Because let's say you were, I'm going to say, what's a good example? A coach is a good example. It's quite generic. If you're doing business in your local community, then you're probably going to have to be a business coach. And about as niche as you could get was, I'm going to be a business coach for female entrepreneurs. That's as much as you could specialize. When you go online, you can go as tight as you like. And in fact, the tighter, the better, because the tighter you get, the clearer your signal, the more people who are on that frequency will resonate. They'll turn around and, what's that? That looks like it's for me. it will speak to the heart. So the attention you'll get will be perhaps less in terms of volume, but in terms of people on your wavelength being really into you, it's much stronger. So it's giving people permission to relax into being themselves, truly being themselves online. And that's hard for a lot of people because they've never thought, well, who actually am I? Who do I want to be to the world? So for me, the way that how my clients would see me is part strategic advisor, because it's how are we going to do all this? Then it's part coach, because some of the things are difficult to do as questions you've never asked yourself before. And then there's a bit of technical support as well. So that's really how it begins. It gets a lot more technical than that, but it all begins with questions around identity.
I've worked with a couple of women who zeroed in on what lights them up, and I've truly seen them blossom in the space of becoming an online entrepreneur. I'm curious. I come from the background of user experience, and we talk a lot about avatars. Do you
Yeah.
work with your potential clients or whoever is coming to you in terms of creating the personas or avatar?
Yes and no. I think where I'm focused is, that sounds wrong. It sounds like I put an awful lot of attention here. I don't. But what I mean by that is, on the one hand, we have what's your zone of genius? This is the power. Your niche is what we're focusing that power through. And that niche, if you want to get technical with it, it does require some really clear, articulate description, part of which is what traditionally you would call a customer avatar. What's interesting is, in terms of avatars, people are motivated by such different things. And sometimes, so some people are motivated by money. And for them, they have one kind of niche. And one of the qualifiers in that niche is they have to have money to spend. Other people are motivated by impact. I have clients that are financially independent. They're not motivated by money, but they're motivated by legacy. So their avatar is quite different. Other people are motivated much more by um, visibility. They already have a healthy business, but they really want to be better known for their business. So I tend to put the avatar on the back burner, because the problem with avatars is people tend to pander to the avatar instead of thinking, who am I? Who do I want to serve? And just letting nature take care of the rest.
That is so profound that you should say that, because counterintuitive to how I had functioned in corporate, I haven't been necessarily modeling my podcast or my pillars and mission around a potential avatar. And I didn't even realize that I hadn't even been doing that. It was more based on what is my why, what lights me up.
Yeah.
And so
And I
it's
think that's right. I think when you have constraints like a local business community, you live in a city and that city is your client base, you have so many constraints that having a customer avatar becomes really important. But when you have the whole world, 8 billion people, your avatar becomes far less important, like you said, than what lights you up. Who do you want to serve? Who do you want to be to that person? Because there's enough people in the world that will align with you, that avatar takes care of themselves. They emerge rather than you creating.
and if you had an anecdotal use case, so to speak, I'm curious, in terms of a story where you saw someone who felt maybe, or witnessed someone who didn't feel like they had the zone of genius or didn't know what it was, and you were able to help them see it.
Just looking over at a board where I have all my client names. And how do I do this without naming names? So I was speaking to a client. How do I sanitize this? So I was speaking to somebody, and they're a marketing consultant. And it was day one, meeting number one with her. And I said, so tell me about your zone of genius. So she said, I'm a marketing consultant. Okay, tell me about your niche. Oh, I don't know. I know I should niche, but I don't know what to do here. So I said, okay, let's imagine you're going to speak at a conference. What would you speak about? Well, marketing strategy. Okay, so everybody in this conference is a marketing strategist. It's a marketing conference. Now, what are you going to speak about? Oh, well, possibly I would speak about advocating for children's digital rights. And why would you choose that? Well, because I've had a degree in psychology, I have 4 children, and my thesis was about this, and I love talking about it. And you know what? I think I'm probably a world's expert in this. Awesome. What else? Well, I operate in the Arabic speaking world, and a lot of the companies that I work with need somebody to bridge them into the culture of the Arab speaking world. And I'm really well positioned to do that. I know how to do it really well. And I've done it for a long time. Okay, so we now have a really clear niche. It's companies who want to lead ethically and responsibly with their products and services into the Arab speaking world in a way that families will be able to say yes to this. We understand it, we can get behind it, and the companies will feel good about what they're doing, and their shareholders will say, yes, this is awesome, we're doing a great job. And she's gone from feeling powerful and successful with a decent business to now feeling that she has a heart-led mission, something she can pour her heart and soul into. So that's one way that it can come about. Sometimes it's very simple like that. Sometimes it's much more profound. And in order to protect the innocent, I can't really go too deep. And I don't want to make stuff up for you.
Yes, no worries. That story alone, though, for a lot of people that I engage with, would be helpful, because what you've done is you've helped them articulate through actual use case scenarios in their life what their zone of genius is, and they may, and as attest to the fact that maybe you feel this way. Perhaps we have more than one zone of genius.
I agree. Most people do. We're very complicated entities as human beings. And what's important as well is that we change. We don't exist in a static moment of time, but human beings grow. And an important part of my work is helping people see where they can grow and where, most importantly, it's worth investing in growth, because business owners are always focused on the return on investment. That's commercially, but that's also at a soul level. And the nature of your show is one where I can have permission to have this conversation, which I generally don't have. But we exist on Earth to grow. That's kind of the whole point. But most people come into adulthood thinking, that's it, I've arrived. And what I've noticed with all my podcast guests, the most successful people I know are not the people now that they were at the beginning of the journey, because they embraced growth. What I recognize now is that your business will grow when you grow. And it's understanding where is it important for you to grow. I should remember what your question was now, but so what was the question? Do you remember what the question was?
I think it was a segue to initially what lights you up, And then when you mentioned the scenario with your client, I immediately thought, well, we do have multiple zone of geniuses.
Yes, we do have multiple zones of genius. And I think what I've found with the most successful people is that excellence tends to be driven by 7 things, 7 core attributes. And at the center of all of this is what lights you up. Number 1 is having the ability to really dream and have healthy fantasy and then solidify that into, you know what, I think I'm going to give this a go. This is number 1. Number 2 is having a bit of discipline and the facility of being productive. And again, this is another area where we can grow. For some people, that is their zone of genius, getting stuff done. It's incredible. Another is your ability to build community, to work with other people, to be networked and interact well. I have a friend, she is a wizard at this. And I see other people really struggle. Creativity and imagination. So many people will tell me, you know what, I'm not creative. I have no imagination. My dad told me a couple of months ago, and I'd never considered that this was even possible. But he said, I have zero imagination. I can't imagine a story. I can't imagine anything that's not real. I can't visualize anything. And I thought, now that makes a lot of sense. But that particular blade is blunt in his armory. Then ability to maintain a healthy mindset and be positive. Again, this is another one. Your ability to be confident and risk-taking is another. And your ability to learn new things. And collectively, these things go together to drive success, and they are multiple zones of genius. And in different people, they show up in different blends. And yeah, so again, that's a long answer to a short question.
I'm listening with such enthusiasm because everything you were saying, it resonates with my journey and all those details and the nuances. You also mentioned discipline. Perhaps you can go deeper into that because I feel like that is one of the key things, a driver for being a solopreneur.
So what I just described, those 7 different attributes or key areas, full disclosure, I nearly finished writing a book that I gave it the working title, The 7 Blades of Good Fortune. I've never actually released it, but it's pretty much done. And the reason I didn't release it was I didn't want that to be the thing that everybody associated with me because I'm a practical guy. But the reality is we're human beings. And if you want to be successful, it's about making sure that you keep each of these 7 blades as sharp as possible. And I put this together after really thinking about all the most successful people I know. What do they have in common? What they all have in common is that they're intentional about these 7 things. The question you asked was, help me out. Do you remember what the question was you asked? There's a reason I recapped that.
Because all 7 resonated with me deeply, and it lit me up. But one particular thing that I know about myself in this journey of being an entrepreneur is discipline.
Discipline. Yes, I remember now. So I brought the 7 up just to put them into context. Discipline in particular, if you're a person who's undisciplined, it's where you're going to feel it kind of ache in your heart a little bit. We're all very aware of which of these blades we probably have dulled when we feel that's holding us back. In terms of discipline, I find systems and processes become really quite helpful. So for me, So I'm going to segue into another little story here. I spent 7 years working, no, 7 years, 15 years working in search and rescue. And I was very accustomed to doing some very scary things. And I remember, for me, the confidence and swagger blade was the most blunt. I was a chicken, if I'm honest. And I look at how do we train people in search and rescue? And we help them become accustomed to the things that most people would find terrifying by a process of gradually desensitizing them to those situations. And becoming disciplined works in much the same way, that it's about putting guardrails around our time, and it's about normalizing behaviors which are not normal for undisciplined people. So for me, I remember when I wanted to start running, I wanted to run marathons. Didn't last very long. I did a couple. But if you ever got into running and you want to get up in the morning and go for a run, people will tell you need to put your running gear out the night before. Don't do it in the morning because it won't happen. So for me now, every day at the end of the day, I write down, what do I want tomorrow to look like? And that sets the intention for the following day. And during the day, there's nobody looking over my shoulder, but I track time for everything because it builds a little bit of intentionality around that. I do other things, but it's these. So there are people like Grant Cardone who will talk about massive action, and we have to be constantly way outside of our comfort zone and doing ridiculous things in order to be successful. I disagree profoundly. My perspective is tiny actions taken consistently will compound up to massive personal change, but also massive business change. So for me in the business, it's about doing the things in the business that long term will compound up to tremendous change, but also taking the actions to sculpt and mold myself, both really quite deeply at the soul level, but also very practically in the things that drive action. And over time, that's had a big impact. I mean, in the last 5 years, my life and my business have been completely transformed through actually doing this myself and not just talking about it.
And it's a really good segue to a couple of points I wanted to make. In the 7 blades that you talked about, I believe the way you articulated that you keep account of how the day will, what your intention is for the next day. It goes back to, like you said, tiny habits. I've been using Atomic Habits app, and I do the same. I have a disciplined routine that is mimicked personally and professionally. It includes things like meditation. So in a roundabout way, I'm going back to something that you had said. You talked about something more philosophical. It was touching upon something more spiritual earlier. I don't remember the exact words, but I'd like to understand how your professional life and personal look like in terms of mindfulness overall.
So in terms of mindfulness, my wife would probably laugh at the idea of Bob Gentle being mindful. However, from a spiritual perspective, or a metaphysical perspective, or a superphysical perspective, there's lots of ways you can look at it. But there's a lot more going on in the universe than we know about. We know that for absolute certainty. So I'm not going to get into a conversation about specific philosophies or religions, but what I know to be true is that we have a surface life, and then there's a life we're completely unaware of most of the time. And I will argue that with anybody. I don't really care. When we talk about things like intention, and setting intentions at the end of the day, for me, on the one hand, that's very practical and functional. But on the other hand, I'm very well aware that I'm sending signals to my unconscious and through my unconscious out into the great unknown. And I know that there are things active in the great unknown that enjoy intention and reward intention and reflect it back in terms of the outer circumstances in the world. So by setting intention and having an attitude of gratitude and joy with what we bring to our life, the universe reciprocates. And I find that practice at the end of every day of setting intention, there's a metaphysical aspect to it, and there's a very, very practical metaphysical aspect to it. In terms of my worldview and my metaphysical worldview, it's very concrete, but I don't really talk about it very often. It's what drives my daily work. It's my personal mission. It's what gets me up in the morning. It's literally what I live for. It's why I managed to overcome fear, and it's why I serve the people that I do. And I'm very comfortable now with who I am. And I hope that comes across in my content. But no, but I think from a philosophical perspective, for me, it's very unified. There's no division between my spiritual, for want of a better word, perspective and my practical life. I see it as a very clear and vibrant whole.
And that is probably why Amplify Me exists, because I feel like you've truly zeroed in on your why personally. And I can tell you from my life journey thus far that having clarity on who I am on the inside and then having that resonate professionally leaves me feeling very unified or centered.
Yeah. I think there's another aspect to this, which, so anybody who's had any kind of spiritual journey is often very frustrated that they don't have all the answers. They don't know what's behind the veil, and they don't know what their personal mission is. They don't know what the journey is. And trying to find the one thing, trying to find their purpose in life. And where I came to was that it actually doesn't matter. What matters is that you're moving. What matters is that you're setting your eyes on the horizon on a particular thing and you move towards it. And it's in the moving towards it that you grow and you just get closer and closer and closer. The point isn't to get to the destination and to understand. The point is to undertake the journey, to fight the monsters, to meet the princess, to grow in the journey, and to undertake all these little side quests. That's what it's for. And that's what I've grown to love about life and about business. And it's allowed me to really relax into just enjoying the journey a little bit. But that was very hard for me to come to. But that's where I am now.
Yes, I truly resonate with that philosophy about the journey, and I can attest to the fact that it's frustrating at times because I'm on the journey of trying to build my business and I'm learning things the hard way, and sometimes I doubt myself, but the philosophical part of me that knows better spiritually is like it's part of the journey. Embrace the moment.
Yeah, I think yes, life is a complicated thing, and there is a lot of mystery, and that's just kind of the point. We're not supposed to understand life. I've come to realize. And it's the same in business. I think if I could offer a piece of advice to anybody that would unify their personal journey and a business journey, it's that comfort zones are very flexible, they're very elastic, and the greatest opportunity is in occupying that space right on the edge. And for a lot of people, that's uncomfortable. But what I find again and again and again is that all opportunity lies just outside the comfort zone. And if you can be comfortable in that space, you can have anything you want. And that's why business is just as much an inner journey as it is a very practical one. That psychologically, unconsciously, we all want to be normal, we all want to be safe. And that's why most people live a very mundane, pedestrian life. But if you're willing to step outside that, and it takes very, very little, then everything changes. The light comes on and you start to see opportunities that were there the whole time.
In the beginning, you mentioned something that I feel like it solidifies what you just said. You mentioned that by nature you were shy, yet you chose to do podcasting. And in that came so many public rewards, correct?
It's so for me, the podcast, I'll maybe iterate what my journeys looked like. So go back 6 years, I was running a very local digital marketing agency. I was not happy that my business was not profitable. And it was just sucking the life out of me. And I knew intellectually a lot of the things that we've been discussing here, where if I go online, I can specialize, I can broaden my reach. But knowing and doing are not the same thing. So I started the podcast. Well, I bought my podcast mic 5 years before I started the podcast. That shows you how chicken I was. But then I started doing it. It was terrifying. It was like going on a roller coaster every single podcast interview. But gradually it became okay. And through that journey, I became comfortable with a little bit of personal visibility, posting selfies and things like that, which again was crippling previously. Then I started doing a little bit of video on YouTube, gradually desensitized myself to that. Now I'm quite happy doing short form video, long form video. My podcast is video as well, most of the time, comfortable on stage. This morning I was on a virtual summit, 500 people there. Awesome. Happy with all of that now. But it was a very gradual process of normalizing things. The impact that's had on me is my business is transformed. I don't do any of the stuff I used to do. I just serve one kind of person, one journey now, and I love it. There was one other thing I was going to say. I can't remember. It's slipped my mind. Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say.
It's okay. It maybe the trigger really was that I had just asked you about not only just the journey, but coming into the realization that your personal life and professional were more unified.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. I feel content at a level that I never have before. And I feel that I come to business with complete integrity. And I'm 100% authentic. And in business, traditionally, that's quite difficult to do. Because if you can imagine, old Bob was the marketing guy that alpha male business owners would hire to do their marketing. And I mean, I'm no sissy, but I'm not a bro, and I'm never going to be anybody's bro. And you put me in a football game or a sports bar, and honestly, it just kill me now. It's just not who I am. So now I can be quite authentically me, both at home and at work. It is completely unified. I think what's even more interesting is, so we spoke about our own hero's journey a little bit. And in most businesses, we live in a competitive environment, a competitive ecosystem. Whereas now, what traditionally would be my direct competitors are some of my best friends, because we're all doing things online and we have an audience of billions. We don't have to fight over business. And this has a powerful impact on normalizing behaviors that would be unusual. So if I'm hanging out with other content creators, content creation becomes normal. Whereas if I were at lunch with family, I would be the weird one that's making YouTube videos. And part of this journey as a content creator is getting to know other people on the same journey, traveling together, supporting each other, which again comes back to be really supportive. And I think that's true of any journey, whether it's a spiritual journey, a very practical business journey, or in search and rescue. If you're doing things together, suddenly these aren't extreme activities anymore. These are normalized, and it makes it much easier to do some of the things you wouldn't otherwise do.
And also the fact that when you mentioned that now your personal life and professional is not only just unified, but you're just giving an example, like if you're out with your family, your behavior is still aligned with the way you behave outside of personal life.
It used to rile me when I heard people talk about professional and not unprofessional is the wrong word, but when somebody said that's not professional, is it good behavior? Is it bad behavior? This is the way I look at it. And if somebody says you have to behave in a certain way to be professional, I'm looking at that and thinking, no, that's completely wrong. You're either behaving well or you're behaving badly. And for me, if I think that I have to behave in a particular way in a particular situation and that's not aligned with me, then either there's something wrong with the situation or there's something wrong with me. It's a very simple thing to work out. So yeah, I think for me, integrity and alignment are really important. And if you find yourself having to act a certain way that doesn't feel like it's aligned with you, really pay attention to that, because it's a clear signal that you have an opportunity for alignment that you didn't realize was there. There's something calling.
And have you found that when you've worked with people that this Amplify process that you've created and the roadmap leading them, I imagine it does. I'm going to ask you if you feel this way, that your clients have more alignment.
Often there's a profound validation at the beginning of the journey. I was on a call with somebody 2 days ago where I was running them through the framework and there were tears because they could sense a version of themselves that they really liked, but getting permission to really say, you know what, this is me, this is who I'm going to be. And this really is my zone of genius, and I can forget about all that other stuff I don't like anyway. It's really liberating. There's another thing that goes along with this, which is fear. That in order to say yes to one thing, you have to say no to others. And a lot of people, when they understand the theory of, okay, I'm going to lean into my zone of genius and I'm going to be for one person in particular. Well, hold on a minute, I'm doing all this other stuff and that's what pays all the bills. So I can't just stop doing that like some kind of hippie going off to live in a commune because my kids need shoes. So the way I describe this is it's a little bit like an oil tanker, that when you pick a new zone of genius or you decide, okay, I'm going to stand for this and I'm going to be for this person, all you're doing is setting a new course. It's a new heading for the ship. Whereas previously it was just sailing around the sea willy-nilly. We have a direction now. The oil tanker takes a very long time to turn. Additionally, and I say this to reassure anybody who's listening, thinking, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to bet on one person, and I'm going to go for this. It will take a very long time, potentially, for people to realize you've done it. My business was predominantly website design and build 5 years ago. People where I used to live, I don't live in the same city anymore, but people in the city I used to live in still have this mythology of Bob Gentle, the web designer. I still get referrals today, 5 years later, when I stopped building websites, for people saying, hey, Bob, you're the website guy. So despite you picking a new niche, the world is going to take a long time to catch up. The oil tanker of awareness will take a while to pivot. The thing is, when you start showing up online, being consistent, building a new audience, amplifying a new message where you were perhaps timid and quiet before, you build a new audience that get you for this new thing. And over time, you migrate into this new space, into this new identity. So it's not from one to the next, but you can start the content journey from one day to the next. Because the truth is, nobody was paying attention to you before. Once you show up with a clear signal on the right frequency, a new audience will emerge who really want that. But if you don't start that journey, you don't get to enjoy the benefit, sometimes in a couple of years after it began. I should caveat that with, although I say it takes a long time for people to pay attention, along the way, you will get lucky, and probably lucky enough to make it totally worth it, staying in it for the long game.
Well, I'm betting on that luck soon, because I certainly always need it after all the, how do I phrase it? Yeah, I put in a lot of earnest effort in the last few years, and it's a path that does require patience.
Well, I tell you, I mean, this is not to bang my own drum, but most people go about this in a slightly haphazard fashion. And it does mean that sometimes the signal's a bit unclear. Sometimes the signal's not very strong. And sometimes it's on one day, off the next. And if anybody's interested, you can download the Personal Brand Business Roadmap for free on my website. And it will give you a method of being consistent so that the process will be more reliable. The process will be more predictable. And you'll also be able to self-diagnose where you may have left things a bit loosey-goosey, and where you might be really strong, but because you didn't do one thing, you can't really leverage it. So the Personal Brand Business Roadmap is very helpful to focus your energies. Because a lot of people, they do a lot of good work, but it's a little bit like hammering on a door rather than opening the door handle.
I highly recommend that roadmap, because I can attest the fact that it's taken me a long time to find the right tools and talk to the right people. And that's one of the motivations behind this podcast, is to help people stay aligned and still have the tools, techniques, and inspiration to take one step after another towards their vision.
Yeah. And I think that, for me, is the most profoundly important thing and the most powerful motivating factor, is that there are so many wonderful people in the world with big hearts and tremendous gifts, and they don't get to express it. And they never get to connect with those people who I know are out there desperate for the one thing that only you listening can do. And it's really important that you do bet on yourself, because I can attest, I'm no genius. If I can make this work, literally anybody can.
I am so grateful. I'm speechless, and that's usually hard for me as my husband. But I truly enjoyed this conversation. Amplify is such a well aligned, or Amplify Me is such a well aligned name. It speaks with such integrity, and the roadmap and the material you just mentioned is very useful. I had started to apply it when I first came across it, but I will have it in the show notes as well. And Bob, thank you so much. I am so grateful for your presence here today.
No, I've really enjoyed this. I don't normally have conversations like this, and yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's made me think a lot about things that I think a lot, but you know, this gap between your brain and your mouth, sometimes it's really hard to get things through. And I've struggled with that my whole life. I generally don't have these conversations, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. So thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. And if in the future, if you feel open to it, I'd love to have you back.
Oh, anytime.
Thank you, Bob. Well, I hope you have a lovely day in Scotland, right?
I will. I will. Well, my day is nearly done now. It's 8 p.m. and I think I'm going to go and walk my aunt's dog who we're babysitting.
Oh, wonderful.
She's going home tomorrow, thank goodness.
Okay. Well, have a great day.
You too. Thank you.